If I was you, I'd be asking for a refund. Everything they do for DOC, they need to defund. Lazy guards, double cells, everything in here is hell. You ever been to the county jail praying that you get some mail? Then you hit receiving all the stories, can't believe them. I thank God that I'm alive, I thank God that I'm still breathing. After COVID, wearing masks, everyone's sad. How did a virus know a budget? It really makes me laugh. We had good times, bad times, but still it made us strong. It was hard to be accountable, I had to right my wrongs. But now I'm long and forgotten, they forgot about me.
Welcome to another compelling episode of the Defund DOC podcast, your number one premium community to hear true prison stories, conniving prison politics, and radical prison reform solutions that will end recidivist crime in America once and for all. Please welcome our hosts, Linda Thompson and Daniel J. Sims, as they delve into another hard-hitting and thought-provoking episode.
Welcome to the Defund DOC podcast. I'm Linda, and with me is my co-host Daniel J. Sims.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome, community. This is an exciting episode coming up. Definitely want everyone to get engaged and listen and share this episode. Before we get started, I would like to add that Linda took the day off of work to do this interview. As those of you out there know, it's hard surviving out there, struggling to pay rent, groceries, and here we are taking time off of work just to get you guys this powerful information. So thank you, Linda, for taking that day off of work. We very much appreciate you helping get this edited and out there. Also, want everybody in the community to know we have the internet radio show, Blog Talk Radio, Defund DOC, where you guys can call in live. We're trying to do more of those shows so that we can start building an audience over there. So really would like you guys to start subscribing to that. That's Blog Talk Radio /Defund DOC. And stay tuned. We got an awesome episode with the Director of Office of Public Defense, Larry Jefferson. He's a power broker in the state of Washington, making major reform efforts in the state in regards to many different things. And we're honored to have him here. Welcome.
It's an honor to be here. I guess my first comment would be is that I'm not a power broker. The people of the state of Washington are the power brokers. And what I try to do as an attorney is provide my best advice, but also let them know that public defense isn't public defense without the public. And so I think that's something the public really needs to know, because I work for everyone in Washington. And so they need to know that more and more and more. And so that's where I'm really glad to do this podcast, so that if people have things they really like, I'd really like to know about it. If people have things they really don't like, I need to know that even more, so that we can have client-centered representation in the state of Washington from the birth of a case until the end of the case. And so and the end of the case means total and complete freedom. And so we haven't set up our structures that way, and that's something that I really want to do for everyone in Washington, because I can believe that public defense is public safety. And I think that's one thing that folks don't really understand. And so I'm really glad to be here today.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, but that is true. You are a public servant, and it sounds from the way that you speak, and it's like you're a very humble person, but you are a very powerful person as well. So to speak so humbly about your position is truly a reflection of your character, and that's awesome. So I got to meet you a little while back at the Black Prisoners Caucus Legislative Summit. That was a nice speech that you did. I mean, it was so passionate. It literally gave me goosebumps to hear somebody speak that candidly about what is happening and your feelings towards trying to cure some of the inequities and address the systemic problems that you've seen. And so that's why we really wanted to come on here and share your story.
Can you share a little bit about yourself and how you ended up becoming the state's top public defender?
I don't know. Through grace and hard times, good times, miserable times. Let's see. I guess significant life events for me is that I grew up in a domestic violence household, but luckily for my family, my grandmother owned a house in Evanston, Illinois, and my mom was able to move there with me when I was 4 years old. And so I think it's just critical when we're talking about the housing crisis and what a house means, if you don't have a house, you really don't have a foundation. Mm-hmm. And so that house gave me the foundation that I needed. It gave my mom about 3 or 4 years to think about what she wanted to do. And what she did is she went to college, and she took me with her. And so I grew up on college campuses. And so one part of that was great, was getting exposed to like Shakespearean plays and, all the things that a college has. Some of the things that really hurt was being separated from my community, meaning I went from an all-black, basically, community to an all-white community. And so that really has an effect on me that lasts until this day. And I guess what I could say about that is if I knew what I know now, I wouldn't have left. You just couldn't pry me away from my people. Like, I just wouldn't do it. On the other hand, I got great opportunities in the public schooling system up here in the state of Washington. In my 7th grade class, I had 3 great friends. One has written about 30 books. Another ran a state agency and now runs some of those restaurants, like a pizza and beer joint. And then the other friend I had was in the Pentagon in 9/11. So just by moving a zip code, I got access to a lot of opportunities. Moving to that zip code, they didn't see those opportunities in me that they saw in my white classmates. And they didn't think that I would ever be the director of public defense. And so I persevered. I had a really hard time in school, basically hardly made it through the 7th grade, but was able to find an alternative school. From that school, I went on to graduate college or high school at 16. I graduated college at 20. I started law school before I could drink. So those first socials were a little funny because it was illegal for them to give me alcohol. So at the law school, law school came about because I have a stepdad who we never thought would be a lawyer. He was into the Grateful Dead and smoking marijuana. Wow. But one day he decided he wanted to go to law school. He had the education and background to support that. And he went, and I saw it as an opportunity for me to, either go into business for myself or, go into politics. At any rate, law school was difficult for me. Didn't like it, but I persevered. I lived on an island, and it just so happened that one of the people who had picked me up and gave me rides was a future a public defender boss. And so I ended up joining with that agency, and I really got in there. And at first, I'd say maybe the first 7 or 8 years, what I was concerned about was not clients. What I was concerned about was winning cases, and there's a real difference. And it was more about a me thing rather than a them thing. And then I just had a sort of a resurrection. I guess I did some juvenile cases, and what I found is that each one of those kids I represented wanted to go home, but there was something stopping them from being able to do that. Maybe it was domestic violence like was in my life. Maybe it was drugs and alcohol, or any number of social determinants of life that were affecting them. I found that the case was just a symptom of the issues that a person might be having. If we could find out what that issue was, or give that young person enough room so they could figure out on their own, maybe they never even told us about it. But if they figured out enough room, we'd never see them again. So we started having great success. I came back to doing felonies again with a more client-centered approach about where is each one of my clients born? What were the social factors? And those social factors, those determinants of health, of access to health care, access to even like, do you have trees? Do you have a park in your neighborhood? Can have a great effect on an individual. And then if we just look at like black maternal health rates for women, they're devastating. So if you just look at any of those things that are going on, they're devastating. And so now what I've dedicated my career to is basically trying to heal from my point of view, the generational trauma that has happened to my people. And when I speak of that, what I'm talking about is the 400 years of slavery. What I'm talking about is that the land that I'm on was stolen from the people that lived here. And so we have not recovered from that theft. And so, people are upset right now if someone breaks into their house and steals all their stuff. They want justice. Well, that justice hasn't always been afforded to all. And so that's where public defense can play a role, I think, in public safety, about getting the full story from an individual the first time, just like a medical appointment. You get that full story, learn who they are and where they're coming from, and even if they have made a mistake, now you got more information. And too much today, the way that our sentences are set up, they're set up in a way that we don't hear the full story. So 10 years later, we go, gosh, if I really known all that about that person, I would have sentenced them differently. So there's lots of things that we need to change. And so that just gives you a little sneak peek into my mind about what I'm doing, which is about total reform of how public defense. I'm not saying we don't do some excellent public defense. I've seen one. I've seen some. I just want it to happen on a more regular basis.
I just got to interrupt and just say that is like the first time I've heard somebody of power in politics actually connect the two, public safety and root causes. Such a elementary for psychologists, but so missing from our criminal justice system. And for you to step up and start amplifying the public safety means addressing root causes. As you said, like just growing up in urban cities, I actually grew up in the urban city. I grew up in foster care. I grew up in juvenile. So I'm around minorities most of my life. And so I identify with their struggle of oppression in the way that they have been treated so badly in this system and in this country. I mean, they literally went from a system of overt slavery to a system of prison slavery. And that's what we're dealing with today. And it has been a legacy that is really hard to combat. And for you to sit here and amplify that message that public safety is addressing root causes, that really touches my heart. Thank you so much for that.
Yes, and you mentioned foster care. Foster care is the worst criminal cases you can get is someone who was in foster care. And it's just, I wasn't in foster care, and I didn't see the full connection until I got this job here about 3 or 4 years ago, that foster care is basically the beginning of mass incarceration, because it's the separation of families. And so foster care wasn't created to actually help people of color. Those benefits that were originally given to like war widows and things of that nature were all white women. And it wasn't until after the civil rights movement that they started including people of color and black people in there, but they didn't get the same level of service. They got service, which was a mandated reporter. They got a service that said, don't go to the hospital. They got a service that said, don't go to the police. They got a system that said, don't ask for help. But if you do ask for help, we're going to report you and take away your children. And so, and those children then grow up without love and support that they need. Even if they couldn't get that from their mom and dad, not being able not to get that from the community means so much. We got certain societies, you can't fall out of family. You should never be able to fall out the circle of concern. And that's what I believe that we fostered through foster care, is allowing people to fall out of the circle of concern, and then we punish them when they make a mistake. It can be a big mistake. And I'm not saying you can't have accountability, because that's very important, but we really need to change what accountability looks like so that it can be true accountability. Because there's no accountability from an attorney to say, exercise your right to remain silent. Right? You can blame everybody else for your situation. You can blame your lawyer. You can blame the judge. You can blame all sorts of things, instead of going through a process where you actually get to hear from the person that maybe you hurt, or hear from their family. Court isn't set up like that. Court is an adversarial process, right, that's bent on winning, and it's bent on domination. And so I don't think we can totally get rid of courts. I think we need to do stuff where we're using more restorative process, because there weren't always prisons, right? But it doesn't mean that humans didn't have conflict. And we can learn how to do that conflict together so that no one falls out of the circle of concern, that we always say that we love you. You should never not think that you're loved. You should always think that you're loved. We can't be disappointed by some of the choices that you made, and address those, right? And then we always have room to come to dinner, because I love dinner. And I love bacon, right? And I want to be free to have some bacon. I want to be free to go to the grocery store and buy the kind of bacon I want, because that's not turkey bacon, right? I want bacon, right? I want bacon in my greens, or whatever you put in the greens. That's what I want. And you don't get that choice when it gets taken away from you from such a young age. And so, so The foster care, mass incarceration, these are all systems, the school-to-prison pipeline, they're all created to hurt people of color. And then since they're dedicated to hurting people of color, they end up also hurting themselves, right? White people are hurting themselves from the general proposition that they just don't want to share. And so this is about sharing, this is about loving, and that's what public defense, that's what we can do. Because that's what I did as an attorney, with being able to evaluate a case, seeing where my client was, where they were in their learning journey. And there are some people who were ready to learn immediately, and there were others that were not. And that's okay, because that's what we got trial systems for. All right? But anyway, so I guess those are my responses to you.
No, I agree 100%. I think the statistics are really, really high in regards to foster care, like surrounded by ex-foster children. I think it's like as high as like almost 90% or something like that end up with a felony or in prison or in jail on probation. So you're absolutely right. So they're piped in here. And you also touched on the school-to-prison pipeline. You touched on that as well, and that's vicious as well because it really impacts minorities the most because essentially if I were to get in a fight with another person, they would reprimand me in school and whatnot, but yet they've had this wide epidemic across the country. When a black man gets into a fight, all of a sudden that's an assault charge, and they're taking them to juvenile or to prison. These are the things that it's important for you to speak out on, and we thank you for that.
Absolutely. No, I went through it myself as a young black man going through the public school system. I didn't graduate through it. Neither did my brother, and neither did my son. Yet all of us went to karate. Those two became black belts in karate. And you tell me a black belt in karate can't finish high school? No. There's something else going on. Right?
Yeah, 100%.
With the long sentences from weapon enhancement, the lack of second chances for rehabilitation, and limited good time opportunities leading to slow death sentences for incarcerated Americans, how can we rally advocates nationwide to shift away from these ineffective hard-on-crime policies to a new smart-on-crime approach?
I think there's a number of things that we can do. I think one of the things that we can do is not rely on government always to solve our disputes, and that we can learn peaceful methods of learning, like nonviolence, that we can teach. I'm really concerned about domestic violence, right? We need to emphasize, we have an unhealthy culture for males. It's males who are filling up these prisons. So we need to start learning how to do relationships from a young age that just aren't abusive. And there are ways that we could do that at our local church, synagogue, club, comic book store. The only thing that holds us back is our imagination. And so that's one thing that we need to look at. We also need to look at the fact that even when people do the worst thing that they've ever done before, that is not the total package. Everybody was born. I've never met an evil baby, but I have met babies that were traumatized, that were hurt, and figured out the best they could how to live. And sometimes what they figured out wasn't great for the rest of us. So I think we need to use more restorative justice. We need to use more restorative justice that is victim-centered. Because if you harm someone, you shouldn't get to pick how you resolve the issue. But we need to, what I'm saying is we need to have more options that are built in so victims have the things that they need immediately. What do I mean? That they get housing immediately. Like if you lose a loved one, that should just be pumped in automatically that you need babysitting, you need, what are all the things that you need? And we don't put that need based on the criminal case. We just do it on what you need to make it through the day. The criminal case will come later, right? I think that if we can do those things and also really talk about these social determinants of health that are really affecting us, and they affect our brain development, right? So it's really easy to tell if someone has a broken leg. It's hard to tell whether someone is developmentally delayed. And it can look different in different people. In some aspects, I'm still 7 years old, right? But other areas, I'm 53, right? And it just happens to be in most of the social areas, I'm 53, where in less of the other areas, I'm 7. But 7-year-olds don't make great decisions, right? And if you have the development issues that then are triggered by alcohol or domestic violence or any of those traumas, right, then I guess what I'm saying is all this stuff needs to be out there so that we can look at it and that we can, if we're, the first thing we need to do is not wait till someone gets in trouble in order to address an issue. And that's how all of our laws are set up. That's how our resources are set up. You don't get a resource until you get mandated reported on it. You don't get a resource until after there's an allegation that you commit a crime. So the first thing we need to do is not do that approach. But if we can't convince people to do that approach, the second thing we need to do is build up the public defender system so we've got lots of nice public safety so that we can initially, there are 3 stages. There's pre-filing. Sometimes before a case is filed that there can be a resolution where the case doesn't have to be filed, right? But it could be directed to the right community resources. So we need to build up our community resources, either through domestic violence, substance abuse, sex offense training, and things like that. I'm talking about special sex offender stuff that usually people have to go to prison for. You don't always need to go to prison for that, even though we think those are very harmful things. Sometimes you can do that in the community. We need to emphasize those things more. Then we need to have the second stage when you're in court, right, so that there's good drug courts, right? I'd open up my drug court to anybody who's got drug issues that is defined by an expert. That's not how our drug courts work. Our drug courts right now, you can only get in if the prosecutor says you can get in, and that's not based on an evaluation. That's just based on whether they personally think that you're safe or not. So, and they don't know because they don't know you. They're not doing an evaluation of you. So I think there are things we could do within our court process to really just focus on what is the need, what is the trauma, can we address it here? If we can't address it here, then we do the trial. But also there's a time when people are in, DOC custody. We need to do more things where we're teaching people restorative justice processes within there. We're doing victim offender dialogues, but also we're realizing that generally for most people, they grow up. Children turn into adults. Adults make better decisions. And adults who now have education, so we need our education systems, and we need to believe that when you get in, reentry starts day one. No more should we wait till 18 months before a person is released to get them the class they need. We need to move all that up because you never know when the law is going to change and a person's going to get popped out, but they haven't received the training that they've been begging and asking for, the classes that they've been asking for, and they also need the right to have a living wage so that when they get out, that $300 gate money, that ain't nothing. That's just to get you a nice dinner, right? So that you can, really enjoy yourself. But you got thousands saved up, so now you get your apartment, but you ain't got to go down to welfare, right? You ain't got to go to a social service because you've worked, right? So I believe that we help people that work. You work all day, I'm behind your back. You don't work, I ain't for that. So I think, those are some of the things that I think we need. But the most important thing is to know that we love everybody. Even if someone has done something, the worst thing that you could ever think of, we still love you. And when you wake up and you're ready, which is going to be most people, there's going to be some people that go to prison forever. But we want to reduce that to the numbers it should be, which is like 1%. The 99% should be working on a plan from day one for their eventual release, eventual freedom. And that even goes for anybody who's got a life sentence, because people be getting out on life sentences now. So, and a life sentence isn't a life sentence; it's a death sentence. It's a living death.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we're not for that.
100%. And I just wanted to touch on what you were speaking on. I think that there should be another one that you should add to that list, is that we have to change the narrative. They just did the debates for the attorney generals. One of the candidates was saying he wanted to be hard on crime. And I'm like, the 1990s want their policy back. Haven't you looked at the actual data of how the recidivism did on a public safety measure, the way that the hard on crimes is actually increasing crime? It's making broken men even more broken. And, it's like, why is the politicians continuing to perpetuate that hard-on crime narrative? We should shift to the smart-on crime. And so that's definitely one that I think that should be spoken on, too, is, they're being rewarded for that failed policy stance, and it's definitely something that should be spoken on.
If I could break in on that, that's a fear narrative that we're talking about, fear, and it's a certain people's fear, because I have fear every day. I got fear every day I leave my house. Every day I leave my house is the last day that I could leave my house. I was in Wenatchee. I went to Larry's Chicken Shack. My name is Larry. I'm going to take a picture by Larry's Chicken Shack, right, and be happy. And my spouse looked at me and said, there are white people looking at you. Don't be happy right now. She gave me the look. I know the look. I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to remain happy. And just when I decided that I was going to remain happy, a woman called the police on me. A white woman called the police on me. The police eventually stopped me, checked me out, didn't do anything. But that person put my life in danger. Yeah, and they knew they were putting my life in danger. And so I could have been shot. And so I guess my meaning is whose safety are we talking about? Because if they're talking about my public safety, we'd have a lot less police than we have right now. Because police don't add to my public safety. That doesn't mean I haven't worked with police. That doesn't mean I don't like police. That just means a reality and it's a fact that police came from slave patrols, right? So I'm more likely to want to see like the community specialist person who is helping me, with garbage and stuff. That looks real like I don't know. We've got people that are around downtown Olympia that'll help. They don't have a gun, right? That's help to me, right? So it's about whose safety are we concerned about. If they were concerned about my safety and the safety of what I would say my community, it's a completely different conversation, right? My safety comes with housing. My safety comes with education. My safety comes with health care. My safety comes with, it's impossible to leave a person on the street because you know what we do? We get around, we build a house for that person, right? So we've lost some of those skills we had when we first came out to the Northwest. Everybody built their own house. Why can't people build a house right now? We can all get the YouTube stuff on how to build a thing. There ain't no one stopping us from fixing the housing crisis but us.
Yeah, and I think that there's ample opportunities out there to end the housing crisis overnight if we actually think like a frontier, like how you said they built houses back in the day, and it can be done today. Let's not fool ourselves that everything has to be hard.
It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be the best materials. It can be the materials, right? That we work with together to do the thing. We can do things today.
Absolutely. So you also touched on something that I would like to address. There was a defund police movement, and one of the things that they were speaking on is adding social workers to the police force. So basically, the police would be coupled with a social worker, yet that movement got falsely maligned, and that social movement kind of was cut short just due to that. They were trying to bring initiatives that would reform the status quo, and we find the same thing with our movement, Defund DLC, is people just shut it down without even acknowledging what the solutions are that are being proposed. People don't realize DLC is a brand new thing. It just was enacted in 1981. Since then, recidivism has skyrocketed. They warehouse us. They took away everything like music room, hobby craft. They took away education. They've stripped this place. It used to be ran by DSHS. And so that's all we're trying to do is say, hey, go back to DSHS, follow the Norwood model, and bring the sentences down to enough for people to get their education and some treatment and re-enter back into society. But nobody will stand long enough to hear the solution we're proposing because of the name Defund DLC. And that's something that we tried to educate people, and we give away the book free, and we're trying to bring this movement to the forefront across the country because, as you said, we need to show our people we love them, not warehouse them with extreme violence and extract as much money as we can from them and take their labor and exploit them, separate them from their families. This is horrible. So thank you for listening and adding to it,
I agree with what you're saying. We have to realize how powerful we've made the police, and they get to decide whether they enforce something or not. And so I think many police, sometimes actively did not enforce things that I think they could. This is my personal opinion. Police may disagree with me, but I think that they have a lot of authority and can do a lot of things. And so, but when they don't want to do it, they can let things get pretty crazy pretty fast. And so, everything needs a plan. You can't go from, 100% prisons to 100% defund in a day, right? It's got to be graduated. And so that, to me, that's why I'm trying to build a bridge to that future. Because I'm trying to lose my job, to be honest with you, right? I would like it to transform into something else, right? People are still going to have problems. People are still going to have issues. Still going to need lawyers. I really like the idea of the social workers and embedding social workers. I believe in the Renton area, there's a program called Be Free. And what they've done is they do have folks that are embedded with the police that are now going out on some of the calls, and they're able to address root cause issues. Some people are even getting access to get into treatment in their own language that they would never have gotten before. And so those are the kinds of things that I think that we need to be building into our systems. Here at my office, we contract with social workers in four different program areas. And so they think differently than lawyers and get people access to resources that lawyers would never think of, because we're just thinking about what's going to happen in court. And someone's life is a lot more complicated than court. And so a social worker can help us deal with root causes. And so I'm trying to increase that workforce. So that's just part of the defense team. And I want that access. My dream is that one day when a person comes in with an issue, they could get connected with an attorney, and then that attorney is connected with a team. And the team is based on, do they need an investigator? Do they need a social worker? What is the person's needs? And then we address those needs, connect them with the agency, because there's nothing worse than having to go from agency to agency, lawyer to lawyer. That shouldn't happen anymore. And that's kind of the future that I'm looking towards
Absolutely.
as we move forward into the future.
What you're speaking on is basically called wraparound services, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. Mr. Inslee, he was able to implement the ID cards for us releasing, and that has made a huge impact for this community to allow them to have, when they have to interact with people, they're able to produce a Washington State ID, because a lot of people who release and have to wait, weeks just to get one, and so just the small little things, as you said, that wraparound services, perhaps, career building, helping people find a job, helping people find housing. My wife is a case manager. She used to be a case manager, and so she would know.
Still a case manager.
Yeah, she's still a case manager.
Yeah. Speaking of jobs, I just really want to say that one of the things I want to do is I would like to have a person that worked for my office in each of the DLC facilities. All right, and I'd like this person to get training as a paralegal. I'd like them to be able to do orientations about the different programs that we have here, like we have our post-conviction program. And so a lot of people come to prison, and within their first year, they have to file what's called a PRP.
I had a question about that.
And so
that was
many
going to be
people,
the next one.
and so many people don't realize that they only have a year or they're going to be time barred. And so now we have a program that a person can be, informed. Like they tell you a little bit at court, but nobody understands it. Like I didn't even understand it as an attorney. I said, you have the right to collateral attack within a year, but people didn't really understand what that meant at the time. Plus, a person is, I'm assuming, going through a lot of difficult transitions at getting to prison. And so what I'd like to do is to be able to have orientation classes so that people got this information, because you can still file that petition even though you pled guilty. And so the chances of success aren't great, but at least there is a chance of success instead of totally being time barred. And so that's something that I'd like to see expanded, through our 5046 program. So we're doing a little bit in that area, but I really want to expand it. And then I want to make it so when that person gets out and they're a paralegal, they can come join the Office of Public Defense, with a job, or get a job anywhere as a paralegal. Doesn't have to be here, but we just want to be a part of that conduit, right? And part of the conduit of information. So just wanted to talk about that. Thanks.
No, absolutely. No, I'm a certified paralegal. I also am a jailhouse lawyer, member of the National Lawyers Guild and the Jailhouse Lawyer Initiative, and that's how I actually came to find my voice. I have no formal education. My education is through the actual case law, Black's Law Dictionary, just fighting for civil rights of those incarcerated in this community, and actually caring about those that I've grown up with in the streets and in the foster care system, in the juvenile system, and now the adult prison system. Like, these are like my family more than my family, and so I care about these people. I love these people, and so that's what gave me the heart for, that gave me the wherewithal to speak my truth and our truth of this community on platforms like this. So it's nice for you to acknowledge and speak on those that are, advancing themselves in the legal field in regards to paralegal. So that's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm trying to experiment now with folks who have lived experience working at my office. I've got one official position in my office where someone has lived experience and they do a community outreach. That's Kamante Carter. And I work with Just Us Solutions, which includes 2 individuals who were formerly incarcerated just last year. And now they're part of the 5046 review team. And so what's amazing about those individuals is from an employer point of view, they work incredibly hard. And so that's what employers should want, is people that work incredibly hard and really care about what they're working on. And so I'm hoping that I'll be able to increase my funding as the years go by. And we'll have to do certain things where we kind of change how our job descriptions look. So we want to invite folks with lived experience. So even if you don't see it on there right now and you have lived experience, we want you at OPD in any way that we can get you, because we know that you're going to fight for people. And we also know you're going to do a thing called object. Objecting is really important, and finding a way that you can be in an office and structure in a state-run thing is I'm looking for the people that work for me to object to me. I didn't say that they get to be rude. I didn't say that they get to send mean and nasty emails. I just said when you see a problem, let's work on it, because we need to have that skill. If you can't object to me, how can I expect you to go to court and object to the judge? How can I expect you to object against injustice, right? So if you're seeing it, we gotta fight what's within ourselves, because each one of us I'll speak for myself. I've been touched by racism. I've been touched by sexism. I've been touched by ableism, anti-LGBTQ issues. Those are things that I need to work on. And so I shouldn't be afraid of making mistakes. What I should be afraid of is if I make a mistake, not making a course correction. And so, because that's what we're asking other state agencies to do. That's what I'm asking the police to do. That's what I'm asking, the public to do, is to own up to our stuff. We make mistakes because we're human, and then we have that accountability where we clean it up. And we're just asking for the maximum accountability, and we need people that take a stand and that object. It's really important. When we don't do that, you wind up with people who go to prison for a life sentence for crimes they didn't commit, right? Or for sentences that should be lesser, even if they did it, because we didn't tell the whole story, right? So we have to put ourselves, we need mitigation experts, right? So that we're telling a person's whole story, and that's just the expectation. It's like a doctor's office, right? I keep saying that, like the doctor wants your whole medical history, and that's what the court should want. The court should not be satisfied if they get a pre-sentence report that's 1 piece of paper, 2 pieces of paper, 3 pieces of paper. That ain't telling me nothing, unless it's the most well-written 3 pieces of, paper that I've ever read about a person. We want to know about the whole person when we're doing sentencing to a felony crime. You want to know who this person is. You want to know how they think and all of these things. And we could do that, right? And I think it would make our systems a lot better.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I mean, like you said, they're not taking into consideration the vast majority of a person's life, and they're relying on 1 piece of paper written by the opposing counsel. And it's an unfair sentencing hearing if you're not getting the holistic report on this person. And in my case, I got 32 years and nobody was even severely hurt. Now, I'm in here for a drug deal dispute turned alleged robbery, and I've essentially been given a death penalty case. I mean, it's a de facto death sentence. I don't know if I'll make it out of here alive. And there's millions of Americans that are suffering the same thing. And so it's definitely is important for people to have that mitigation that can come before the court, also before the clemency board or governor or the court in regards to second chances, to have that mitigation there to say, hey, look, this is what really, nobody knew my story until I wrote my story and explained what happened to me in my life and started speaking on these podcasts. And now everybody's like, wow, if I would have known what you've been through, maybe, we would have looked at everything differently. But that's the same thing, like you said, that's happening to mostly all our Americans across the country. Most of them are all broken men, that have dealt with some kind of hardship, poverty, racism, sexism. So just let's bring these stories to the forefront, like you said. Let's bring it before the judge.
Yeah, and I think that something that's important in that story is stories are hard to bring on your own, right? And nobody should ever be alone. And to me, that's why I don't want public defense to end on the day someone is sentenced, because the sentence is just the beginning. When I've sentenced a person, or when a person gets sentenced, the judge should normally be a little mad at that person because they just heard about all this stuff, right? But what makes a person is not the sentence; it's is how you react to it. And if you react to it with positive change, learning, and to me, you get connected with a team, and that team means you get a lawyer, you get an investigator, you get a mitigation expert who can really help and assist. There's assistance that people need just being in DOC with the infraction. So I don't think a person should ever not have access to a lawyer, especially when we're talking about the government. I mean, I know I'm in the government, but I'm in the government and I'm in the state agency that's supposed to fight other state agencies. That's my job, right? It's like the body system. We have the immune system. That's the role that we play. We need to play it fully. And so I love to be able to represent people on clemency. I love to be able to represent people on ISRB hearings. And I love to be able to represent people on second chance, right? Because the second chance, it says a chance. It's not automatic, right? And so, and it should be within the light of day. Because I hate 6164. Because 6164 is decided in a back room. It's not, prosecutors get to decide whether someone can be resentenced in the interest of justice. It's the interest of their justice, right? Not the community. The community isn't making that decision. The judge isn't making that decision. We need to rectify that. We need to change that so that happens in a courtroom where the victim can be there. And the victims really need to hear this stuff because they've been sold a bill of lies that a person's going to get a certain amount of years, that a person's going to be there forever. And that's not the way it's going to be anymore. So we really need to get victims prepared, and we need to, every policy that I try to put into place is victim-centered. It needs to be victim-centered in some way. So they're getting access to the resources that they need immediately. Because I want people to want to call 911. But right now, 50% of any assault, they'll never call because they know they're not going to get the services they need. They know either, A, they won't be believed. And, I like to believe people. But when they say things, that doesn't automatically mean that someone's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't want to get those two things confused. That's a court standard. That's an adversarial standard. What I'm talking about with victims is if someone says they're hurt, I believe them. If they're tricking me, they're tricking themselves, right? And we can deal with people who do those things, right? That's easy to deal with. But what would be great is to really support, I want to support the victims of crime. I've been a victim of crime. Someone stole my car. I didn't think I would think it was that rough, but they took a knife and knifed all the way through the first car I ever had. And so that really hurt more than I ever thought that it would. I don't know who those people are. I hope they got what they needed. If it was something really important, I hope they got it out. But I was lucky that I had access to a lot of counseling, basically throughout my whole life. And I do counseling now. And so I want stuff like that to be accessible to everyone because we all got issues.
No, it's awesome that what you said, and I just wanted to touch on it because you said it's focused on the victims. And I always like to say that, justice system is fair. And that doesn't mean that it's 99% the victim of the crime. It's also 50% the victim on the other side, the offender's family, the mother, the father, the children, that they deserve for their family member to be rehabilitated, to be restored, and they're victims as well. My children, my son is an innocent victim. He hasn't had his father in 19 years. He's a victim. So
yeah, I totally agree with you. That's one thing that people don't think about at all. Is that when you imprison a person, you not only imprison them, you imprison their family, and you imprison their community. Right, and so that's why some communities don't look great. It's because we put into prison all the people who would be leaders, right, in that community,
100%,
and the people that they needed. It doesn't. And I'm not saying don't hold them accountable, because accountability is important. There's got to be able to, but there's a difference, right? And it's just recognizing when someone's grown up. And if you look at any of the reports that like Dr. Beckett has done from UW. All the stuff she's done, that's usually about 10 to 15 years. And I'm talking about for some of the big things, like the kind of sentence that you got, right? And so usually when we have parole, people would usually get out around 13 years on average.
Yeah, that was considered a life sentence back then. Yeah, I know.
Absolutely.
Crazy.
So, I mean, to me, we've got to get back to some of that philosophy because otherwise we just have this aging prison population and damaged communities. And now we need a nursing home that's security grade for people. Yeah. I mean, I'm just flabbergasted every time I go to DOC and I see people in wheelchairs and walkers and all this stuff. Because
no danger to society, but
no,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, they could do something maybe on the internet if they knew how to use it, or they could call up and do some credit card fraud or whatever. And so if that's all they're going to do, I mean, I don't want someone to get my credit card. Believe me, I don't like that either. But if that's the big harm that we're trying to prevent, let them go. We'll catch them. Yeah.
As a skilled lawyer and leader in a government agency, what wisdom can you share with activists and advocates who are working to reform the system?
Object. There are many roads to the place that we want to go. And the place that we want to go is the freedom, liberty, and justice for all. Now, some of those words may have been put in the Constitution, and at the time they were put in the Constitution, they weren't meant for everybody. We've got to bring that to everybody. And I think people need to keep pushing in different ways. Some people might use the Malcolm X way. Defund it all, and say it all day. And some people might give the Martin Luther King approach, all right? But if you listen to everything that Martin Luther King was saying, by the time that he was killed, he was talking probably more like Malcolm X, all right, about the system, wanting not to be involved in the Vietnam War, making sure that people were properly paid for the labor that they did. So we've just got a full challenge ahead of us. Activists just need to remember that we're not in a short fight. They need to remember that we're in a long fight. Before the Civil War, the abolitionists were working in the 1830s and the 1840s and the 1850s, doing the ground game to make all of those things happen. Right now, we're having issues with women being able to have bodily autonomy. And the folks that brought about that change, they worked on it the next day after that opinion came out from the Supreme Court, right? They worked on it. And they worked on it for, 40, 50 years? And then they changed it. And so activists have to prepare themselves for the long haul, for what they're doing. And with preparing for the long haul, they need to do things like rest, and they need to do things like joy, and they need to do things that are loving. And to me, we need to think about our young people. Our young people are our most valuable resources. There should never be a day when in the United States of America we ran out of baby formula, right? We need to support humans from 0 to 3. That is a very important time period for the formation of their brains, so they have lots of good grit and can recover from the things that happen. Because the things are going to happen. People are going to get cancer. People are going to get sick. However, if you have exercised and you are well nourished and you are well loved, you can fight those things off for a long and healthy life. And so those would be the thoughts that I would share with everyone. And just remember that we are all members of the beloved community, and that public defense is you. Public defense is us, because we are one and together, and we are united for a safe world where folks are respected and get access to the things that they need.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, man. Those wise words, that's awesome. And a lot of people just want to neglect the one part of the Constitution where it says to make a more perfect union. That means that it's a work in progress, constantly trying to, agitate for change and betterment of, the institutions that govern us. So thank you so much for that, for those wise words. And I heard you speak about Dr. Beckett, definitely powerful voice in what she spoke on in the legacy of harm, the sentencing. I think it was at the Supreme Court, but yeah.
Yeah, the symposium.
Yeah, the symposium, yes. So, yeah, thank you so much, man. Wow, your words were powerful to me, and just so you know, you're like one of my intellectual heroes of this state. I've watched you a number of times on TVW, and I've also read a number of your, I guess it would be petitions, but you would essentially petition the Supreme Court to change rules, criminal rules, that would help get reviewed by attorneys for, like, the Blake decision and other stuff. Man, you're doing a lot of good work, man. Keep doing what you're doing.
Well, it's just not me. There's now, my office has grown from 20 people to 70 people, and it's all of us working together. But it's just not us. It's the community. And we do all of this together. So let's not do anything alone. Let's remember that we are loved and that we have friends, and that we work together. And when we remember those things, basically we will win.
Absolutely. And, yeah, thank you for that correction, because there's a lot of good public defenders out there. There's a lot of good attorneys out there, defense attorneys, and people that are actually fighting for, there's even people on in the prosecution side that are trying to make, systemic changes in the way that, people are being treated in the criminal justice system. So those are the, like you said, it takes a community of people, and thank you so much for, enlightening us and sharing that shine,
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey friends, another episode is over. We want to keep improving this podcast, so we need your suggestions for future episodes. Also, as you know, I have been in prison almost 20 years, so if you have any questions about the criminal justice system, feel free to ask and I will try to answer it. Please email your suggestions or questions on our website. Do you have a social media community that you can share our posts with? Please join our social media platforms and share our posts. That really helps. Also, I know you are busy, but taking one moment to do a review would help us tremendously. Thank you all.
Start the long and forgotten, threw away the key. Gone and forgotten, they forgot about me. Long and forgotten, threw away the key. Gone and forgotten, defund the OC. If I was you, I'd be asking for a refund. Everything they do for DOC, they need to defund. Lazy guards, double cells, everything in here is hell. You ever been to the county jail praying that you get some mail? Then you hit receiving all the stories, can't believe them. I thank God that I'm alive, I thank God that I'm still breathing. After COVID, wearing masks, everyone's sad. How did a virus know a budget? It really makes me laugh. We had good times, bad times, but still it made us strong. It was hard to be accountable, I had to right my wrongs. But now I'm long and forgotten, they forgot about me.